Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know noon isn't always an easy time, but we hoped it would work. And if you're watching the recording, thank you for watching. We're so proud for the Reading League New York to welcome Dr. Katie Pace-Miles and other members of the Reading Institute team here. Katie Pace-Miles is one of our advisory board members. She is also an associate professor at Brooklyn College, City University. Dr. Miles' research interests include orthographic mapping, high-frequency word learning, reading interventions, and literacy instruction that is both developmentally appropriate and grounded in the science of reading. Dr. Miles is the academic advisor for Reading Go as an evidence-based intervention for first and second grade students. She is the author of Reading Ready, an explicit and systematic word reading curriculum for kindergarten and first grade students. Dr. Miles is also the co-founder and principal investigator of CUNY Reading Corps, which improves pre-service teacher training and provides free high-dosage tutoring to historically underserved New York City students. Dr. Miles' latest projects involve opening new advanced graduate coursework in reading science and finding more ways to bring free tutoring to emergent readers in need of support. It is such an honor to welcome Dr. Miles. Katie?
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to say thank you to the Reading League. I see some of the Reading League members here, and I'm so happy to see you. Hi, Maria and others. Thanks for the support. Thank you for the platform. You have an incredible network for us to share what we do. And I also want to give a shout out to the Reading Institute team. I was able to open this nonprofit based on the free tutoring work that I was doing through the universities, and the Reading Institute team has really helped supercharge the work and get more free resources out to the community in New York City, in New York State, and across the country. And today we're so happy to bring you one of our free resources, which is the Reading Ready Caregiver Guide. This guide is specifically written for parents and caregivers. You are your child's first teacher, and we are here to support you. Since 2020, I've been able to share early literacy programs, both Reading Ready and Reading Go, with thousands of educators of K to second grade students. So at the Reading Institute, the nonprofit that I mentioned, we partner with universities, districts, schools, and community-based organizations, as well as caregivers that are affiliated with community-based organizations or are outside of the community-based organizations, all on a mission to make sure children are able to develop the essential building blocks to become successful readers. Today, you will be able to, after this presentation, number one, build your knowledge about the necessary skills that a child needs in order to read, explore how to help your child learn to read using the Caregiver Guide, and review activities to help your child learn letter names, shapes, and sounds in another free resource that we're going to give you as part of this talk, which is called the Letter Knowledge Guide. We hope you leave today's session feeling excited and prepared to help your child learn to read. Before we get to the nuts and bolts of the Reading Ready Caregiver Guide, we're going to spend just a few minutes discussing how children learn to read. And we're going to keep this at a high level. Okay? From birth, students build, or I should say children, build their oral language. As they begin to listen and speak, they also start to hear the sounds that make up words. So they're learning all of these vocabulary words, and when they're hearing words, eventually they start recognizing distinct sounds in those words. In early childhood, children begin to learn the names, shapes, and sounds of letters, and they're continuing to fine-tune their ear to the sounds in spoken language. Children can then begin learning to read. Children begin to understand how letters or groups of letters match to sounds in words, and they use these letter-sound connections to both read and spell. And eventually, students store the words that they have learned in memory. But this takes a lot of repetition, okay, for many students. They can then read sentences, paragraphs, and books to learn new information. But it's a pretty decent journey to the point where, as I'm a parent of two that I'll talk about my kiddos along the way, but it's a long journey before we actually get to this point of reading to learn. Okay, so I want us to all kind of like recognize and sit in that space as caregivers that want to get to that last box so quickly. It's like this takes time. It takes so much time in part because English is complex. In the English language, there are 26 letters. There are 44 sounds, okay? So there are more sounds than letters, and some letters make multiple sounds, okay? In fact, there's actually over 250 spelling patterns that represent the 44 sounds. So you start combining those letters in all different ways to represent the 44 sounds that we hear in words. As you can imagine, this can be incredibly confusing, especially for children who are just learning to read. People often say that English is unruly and full of exceptions, and we just need to like memorize all these words. However, research that I've done with my colleagues, as well as many other reading researchers throughout the decades, have shown that more than 84% of English words follow very clear rules. Okay, even in a recent analysis I did with some colleagues, we took a set of high frequency words and we found that it was 98% regular. Okay, so it just requires a decent amount of teaching that we need to do. We need to give the spelling patterns to our children, and then they can use it to combine, to read and spell. Okay, so let's take a look at an example of this complexity. Let's just take a look at the long sound of E. This sound can be spelled in many different ways, as you see here. A single E in the word be, two E's in the word see, an EA in meat, an EY in key, that EI in protein. The end of two-syllable words, baby, is often represented by a Y, also an EY. You saw that in key above. And then you have these, an E consonant E. All right. So this is just one of many examples where there are multiple ways to spell one sound. Okay. I want to note though, we would never teach all of these spelling patterns or phonetic elements, we call it in the reading world. We would never teach all of these patterns at once. And this is why a strong phonics scope and sequence, which tells you when to teach which letter sound pattern, matters so much. And often parents don't have this at home, right? Like, again, if I wasn't in this field, I wouldn't have a phonics scope and sequence just lying around to help my kiddo get up and going with their reading skills. So before we go into the caregiver guide, just a few terms I want to make sure you have if you need them. The first is phonemes, okay? A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound that makes up words. And as I mentioned, the English language has 44 of them. In the caregiver guide, we don't use the term phoneme. It feels a little academic. We don't need that. We're just going to say sounds, okay? The next term is phonemic awareness. So this is the ability to hear each of the individual sounds in words, as well as your ability to manipulate or move those sounds around in your mind, okay? It's not about the letters at this point. It's just about hearing the word cat. You don't see it, you hear it, and are you able to identify the first sound, the middle sound, the last sound? All the sounds. Can you change the k to a h? What word do you get? Hat. There you go. Okay, and finally, phonics. This is a term you've likely heard. It means connecting letters to those sounds. Students need phonics instruction to help them build these connections in order to begin reading words. Okay, under the umbrella of phonemic awareness, okay, that concept about sounds and phonemic awareness, I kind of dropped those in. It's actually quite complex, okay? There are 6 specific skills that increase from the least to the most complex, and they're essential for readers. But please remember, this is just about your ability to hear sounds in words, identify them and isolate them. And we're only going to focus on a few of these here, okay? The first is isolation. Okay, this means hearing the individual sounds in words. Like I had mentioned before, you have the word cat. Can you isolate what the first sound is? Can you isolate the middle sound? Ah. The last sound, you got it, okay? Usually we work with students on can you just isolate the first sound, and then we'll get to the last sound and the middle sound. Eventually we get to blending, okay? This means blending or bringing the sounds together. So, for example, with the sounds k, a, t, to blend would mean to combine these to form the word cat. There are other more advanced skills, okay? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We have our segmenting too. Sorry, here. You see here that cat, you can, to a student or a child, you could say, tell me all the sounds you hear in cat. Now, this is beyond the isolation of just identifying one of them. Eventually, when you segment, you're able to say all or identify all of the sounds in the word, okay? These are where we're going to spend most of our time, okay? And in fact, we are going to do most of our activities in the caregiver guide around blending and segmenting. There is also addition as well as deletion and substitution. But again, and we're going to put our brackets up there, we're going to spend most of our time in the segmenting and blending zone of phonemic awareness in our guide. All right. Now, we talked a lot about sounds. Now let's connect it to those letters. We're going to use a very common approach, and more recently, it's become a common approach, I should say. This is called word mapping, and this helps us count the sounds in words and then match those sounds to letters. Each square in the top row represents one sound. So the top boxes do not represent the letters. I just want to emphasize this. It represents the sounds. For example, let's count the sounds in the word path. A. Once your child segments each sound in the word, they are ready to identify the letter or letters that make each sound. Okay? So, for example, you've got that first sound P is represented by a P, A by an A, and Th is represented by two letters. TH makes the sound. And this might be a new concept to parents that you could have one sound, but it's represented by two, sometimes even three letters. Okay. We give you lots of support for this in the guide. And if you click on this QR code, you will get the free copy of the guide. Okay. The other thing is stay with us until the end of this, because we're very happy to use some of the grant money that we have at the Reading Institute to mail you a hard copy of the guide. So instant gratification, you get the electronic copy right now. We're going to give you an electronic copy of letter knowledge in just a few minutes. And then at the end, if you want to provide a mailing address, you could be your office, your home, a P.O. box, we will mail you the actual hard copy, which is great. All right. So as mentioned earlier, Reading Ready, this program that I wrote, was developed at the height of, I don't actually think I mentioned the fact that it was developed at the height of the pandemic. And I wrote it in response to the growing and urgent need to provide both educators and caregivers with a free and simple approach to supporting emergent readers. I actually authored the first version of the caregiver guide to reflect what I was doing at home with my older child at the time where she was lifting off into word reading. And it's what I use today with my younger child who's in kindergarten, okay? We have an educator guide that has a peach tan cover. And if you ever hear about Reading Ready being used at universities and at schools, that's the full tutoring package that we give for free for universities and schools to use. So, but the caregiver guide has a special, like, keeping the parent at heart with me and my colleagues at the Reading Institute. We have all, been working with our children. And so we really thought, what are the types of activities that would keep a child engaged when they're working with their parent, which is different than a teacher working with the student. And when a teacher sometimes says, we need to do this next, the child is compliant. And that's not always the case when we're at home with our children. Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of this caregiver guide, okay? It is intended to be used preventatively in kindergarten. So this, for me, it's like, this is just how kids are going to develop very good word reading habits. This is what most children need to lift up into efficient word reading. It is often used as intervention, though, for first and second graders, meaning children who may need extra support beyond what is being provided in the whole group setting in their classroom. Okay, that's in with you. If you've ever heard about my work with CUNY Reading Corps and other universities, we often have first and second graders who need Reading Ready because they didn't get this in kindergarten. We're happy to give it to them, but it also, it's so preventative. We really, for all students, they just need this. Okay. In addition to the guide itself, the manual, there are a few materials that will help you facilitate the activities that are included. So you want to have a set of small blocks, you'll see these in our videos, or other small similar shape items from around the house. Legos are a really good alternative to blocks. It will also be helpful to have a whiteboard and dry erase marker, but please don't worry if you don't have that. Paper and pencil work just fine. A set of magnetic letters can also be helpful for activities. You can go to the dollar store and buy a set of magnetic letters. But again, we've designed everything where if you don't have those, don't worry. Paper and pencil are totally fine. Lastly, there are several activity templates at the front of the manual, and we don't think that anyone has a photocopier at home, okay? I certainly don't. But in order to reuse those, the teacher trick is that you just slide it into a sheet protector, which you can also get at the dollar store, or maybe you have an old one around the house that you can reuse, okay? Just slide that template into the sheet protector. You can actually write on the template with the dry erase marker if you have one, erase it, and you can use it over and over again. Little teacher hack. Okay. All right, now that you know what you'll need for the caregiver guide, you have the guide, you've got this concept of the materials, let's talk about the structure of the program, okay? The guide is organized into 10 units. We'll talk more about the units in a second. You will spend 3 days, or let's say there are 3 lessons per unit, and you can repeat these activities if necessary. We keep things fresh, okay? So you might spend 3 days on a unit, you might spend 6 days, you might do it one day, skip a day, come back to it. We know what family life is like, okay? There are 4 activities in each one of those lessons, okay? Ultimately, you're going to get about 30 to 60 lessons out of this program. And you should spend about 15 minutes each time you attempt to use the manual. But again, I'm a parent. One of my children would very well make it through the 15 minutes with me. And my other kiddo, it might be more like we do 5 minutes, we take a break, we come back to it another time, we take a break. You make this guide work for you. Okay, so we've included a lot of options, a lot of fun activities to keep engagement high. Try to get through all of those in that short 15-minute lesson, and don't stress if you can't. Okay, let's talk a bit more about what we mean by a unit. As I just mentioned, there's 10 units, and you see this very basic scope and sequence here. Each unit has a specific learning focus. For example, in Unit 1, students learn about the letters S-A-T-I-P-N and the sounds that those letters make, and they practice reading words and sentences that contain just those letters. Okay, that's in Unit 1. In Unit 5, students learn about double consonants and they begin reading words with those spelling patterns. Okay, and the sentences they are going to read will contain everything they've learned above, plus the new doubling consonant rule. By Unit 10, students have learned more complicated spelling patterns and sounds to read more challenging words. And by that point, we've got so much knowledge to add into the sentences that we're asking students to read. And we have decodable books, which we'll talk about in just a second, okay? So the program increases with complexity. As students learn and master different phonetic elements that are reflective of this Reading Ready phonetic elements chart, they are really building their capacity to go up and on into more advanced phonetic concepts. So I don't want to give any impression that these are all the phonics phonetic patterns that a student needs to know. That is not the case at all. That's why this is called Reading Ready. This is getting you ready to go up and on and be as successful as you can be with the more advanced phonetic concepts. We teach those in Reading Go, which is a program we also give out for free. And your schools should be really emphasizing advanced phonetic patterns beyond this for years to come, well into 2nd and 3rd grade. Okay, now that you know what we mean by units, let's dig into what you will find in each daily lesson. So each lesson has 4 components. Letter practice takes 1 minute. In this lesson component, you will do an activity that introduces the sounds of the unit's target letters and spelling patterns. Then we go to sound practice. Take 2 minutes. In this component, you will do an activity that focuses on just the sounds of the unit's target letters and spelling patterns. No words or letters are used in these activities, but it's emphasizing the sounds that will come out of the letters that you are learning. Then we've got word practice. You're going to take about 6 minutes. In this component, you will do an activity that brings together letters and sounds to make the words to read and spell. Finally, we've got reading and writing practice, which is about 6 minutes. And here your child will do an activity in which they are either reading decodable sentences, okay, writing words or sentences, or possibly they're on to the point where they're reading a decodable book, which is just a book that contains the words that they are able to read, okay, words that they've been learning about. All right, so each activity will have a sheet. We call this the activity sheet that looks just like this, and we're going to review some of these components here. So there will always be a list of materials for the activity at the top. Directions will always be in blank text right there. You see that? This includes directions for activity setup and how to guide your child through the activity. So we are as simple as we can be with these directions, okay? So not a lot of language, very simple, cutting straight to the chase and explicit. The caregiver is modeling and saying something, which is the next thing. Anything the caregiver says is in blue text. You see a little blue on the screen there. And anything your child needs to repeat back or say will be in red text. So you see the red text there. All right, so again, caregivers are going to say it in blue, the child is in red, and everything you need. So we're not saying, go and do an activity where you go on a scavenger hunt or something like that. And you're like, okay, what letters? How do I do that or whatnot? No, the whole thing is right here, 4 to 5 lines. It's going to tell you exactly what to do and even what to say. All right. As you get the hang of this, you will start using this script in the way that suits you best. All right. So you might want to make some adjustments, and that's okay. All right. So now we're going to go through each of the 4 lesson components. First up is letter practice. Okay. And these are our letter picture cards. Okay. Letter practice activities are important because they help your child connect letters to groups of they connect letters or groups of letters to sounds. These letter sound connections are essential, as you know, to word reading. Okay, there are a few different letter practice activities that you will find throughout the guide, and we're going to be using these letter picture cards as much as possible, okay? In units 1 to 4, you will always do the letter picture card activity. You will want to use the cards that you see there. We have a full set. They're colorful and engaging at the beginning of the guide for this activity. So we put all the cards in the guide, and we recommend cutting them out and sorting them, not sorting them, storing them in a Ziploc baggie so that they can be reused, okay? As you can see, these letter picture cards, the sound of the letter is contained in the picture, right? Apple, apple, B, ball, B, or don't do it that way. We have our own way that we do this. I think I just channeled a little bit of some other program out there when I saw that. So we're going to do it in our own way. Okay. Moving into Unit 5, you will do different versions of the letter sound activities, and we call it See It, Say It. All right. Each activity for those units has a specific set of cards that you will also find in the template section at the beginning of the guide. Once again, we recommend cutting out those cards and storing them in a baggie for repeated use. Okay, the next component is sound practice. So again, we start with letter practice, we get to sound practice, and remember, we're going to focus here as much as we can on segmenting and blending, blending and segmenting, okay? So sound practice activities will focus on one of those phonemic awareness skills. So we've got isolation, blending, segmenting, and a little bit of addition, deletion, and substitution. And I just want to say we add in those higher level elements later on in the guide to keep things spicy. Honestly, keep things fun, keep things engaged. My little 5-year-olds, I know I've really got to focus here on blending and segmenting, but I couldn't get to blending and segmenting until I did isolation. I really needed to make sure he could isolate one sound at a time. Then I moved on. And then when he was getting the hang of it, I just made things a little more advanced to, again, keep things lively. Okay. So you know that with isolation, you're going to isolate a single sound, and it's practiced through 2 activities that you see here: sound isolation with blocks. And I mentioned the scavenger hunt, but we give you the full set of directions to do this. Okay. Blending, next one, or being able to put sounds together to say the word, is practiced with 3 activities: sound blending with blocks, sound slide, and a character slide. I hope you find these very fun. Okay, but next is segmenting. This is being able to segment a word into each of its individual sounds. This is practiced through 4 activities. You'll do sound segmenting with blocks, sound stomping, so you get that kinesthetic, jumping sounds, and head, shoulders, knees, and toes sounds. So you can see, like, sometimes you're sitting at the table moving the blocks around, right? Sometimes you're standing up and you're doing the full body motions. Okay. Lastly, students will practice the more sophisticated phonemic awareness skills by doing sound addition with blocks, sound deletion with blocks, and some fun sound charades. The students will be very well equipped to do this towards the end. These activities are used across the units, and we make adjustments along the way, so we've really kept in mind the developmental sequence of this. Let's watch a quick example of some of these activities, okay? This is just a quick clip of a caregiver and child doing the sound blending with blocks activity.
Watch and listen and repeat after me. It. Your turn.
It. Watch and listen and repeat after me. At. Your turn. At.
Great. In this next clip, let's watch the caregiver and child do the sound segmenting with blocks activity.
Watch, listen, and repeat after me. The word is am. Can you try?
Am.
I can't help, that's Georgie. That's my daughter is now 8 years old and in 3rd grade, but that was Georgie when she was much younger doing these activities. And those are many of my grad students from CUNY who've used the educator guide for years. And so I always like to give them a shout out. All right. So the 3rd component of each lesson, so let's just review. We did letter practice, then we did sound practice. Now we're going to go into word practice. Now this moves really quickly, right? It's 1 minute, 2 minutes, and now we've got our 6 minutes of word practice, okay? Word practice activities are critical for obvious reasons. All right, this is where you're going to take that letter knowledge from part 1, combine it with the sound knowledge from part 2, and let's lift off into really good word reading habits. Okay? There are 6 different word practice activities. Some you'll see in every unit, and others you might encounter just once or twice across the whole program, so they're really special. Remember, each activity will have its own set of directions that include the materials and the visuals to help you facilitate the activity. So it's not just all the words, we'll actually show you what this should look like on the right-hand side. Each of these word practice activities will provide your child with a chance to build, read, spell the words using their new knowledge of letter-sound connections. So let's watch a quick clip of the word chain activity. This is something that you'll do in every unit.
Make the word at. Read the word at. Now make the word sat. Read the word sat. Now I want you to make the word pat, but only change the letters that need to be changed. Read the word hat. Now make the word hat, but again, only change the letters that need to be changed. Read the word hat. You're killing it.
A shout out to Lizelle and Sam, who are CUNY connections. Lizelle's a former grad student. It's wonderful. And let's watch another quick clip of word mapping. So this is another activity that you're going to come across over and over again as you progress through the program. And you'll become very equipped to do this proficiently or fluently with your child.
Watch and listen and say this word after me. Pat. Pat. I want you to move a chip into the gray boxes for each sound that you hear in the word pat. Ah. Now spell pat by writing the letters that make each sound in the white box. Now let's check our spelling. P-A-T. Pat. All right.
Great. Okay, the last component of every lesson. So again, let's just review. We went letter practice, sound practice, word practice. Our last component, we put it all together for our reading and writing practice, okay? This is in every lesson you're going to come upon this, and this is when your child is either going to be reading decodable sentences or decodable books, and they're going to be doing some sentence writing along the way, okay? So it's a very predictable pattern, as I just mentioned. On day 1, you will do sentence reading. On day 2, you will do sentence writing. And on day 3, you will do book reading. Okay, there is a supplemental activity called tricky word practice. You will do this in addition to sentence reading, but you only do it in a few units. And I don't want to overwhelm you with it right now. It's going to happen. It's going to be great. And don't worry, we've got it all in there for you. Something that I didn't mention yet that I do, as a parent, I could imagine you listening to this and being like, okay, so you're going to tell me what to do, but what words? Do I have to come up with the words? No, for every unit, when we say these are the letters that you're going to focus on, we also give you, when you get to word practice, we give you each and every word to use in word chains and word mapping. We give you all of the sentences to read for decodable sentence practice. We tell you the sentence to use, and we give you the decodable books. It's all right there for you, just like a teacher would have. Okay. So let's watch an example of this sentence reading activity. Now I'm being a little indulgent here because again, you're going to see Georgie, but I just want to show you how a very emergent reader, my own child, what that child would sound like and how we actually start with just a few phrases before we move the child into sentences. And please note that we have enlarged the font of what you're going to see Georgie reading in our revised guide. So if anyone has the old caregiver guide, put that one aside and always use this new one because we were able to make some important revisions.
Now, let's work with reading some sentences. Let's read the first one. Let's point to each word. Can you point?
Have it.
Now, can you read the sentence together?
A tin pit.
Awesome.
Now, let's read this sentence. Point to each word as you read it. A tin pit. Let's look at this word one more time. What sound does the letter A make? Ah. Okay, so now let's try this word one more time using that same sound. A tin pit. All right, let's try this sentence. Again, point to each word as you read it. The tin pan? Uh-huh. Now this sentence here, point to each word as you read it. It is tan. Now this sentence, point to each word as you read it. It and the pan? All right. Now, again, I want to acknowledge our tutors there were saying sentence, even though it was a phrase, not a problem. I don't think at this point we're too concerned about phrase versus sentence for these kiddos. Eventually, we're going to be very clear about what is a sentence and what is an incomplete sentence, right? But again, I just wanted you to see two children at two different points, two different ages, really, and how what we are helping them do, we need to anchor them to those letters, sound correspondences. And the feedback that we give them as their caregiver is to go back and look at those letters and please give us the sound that those letters make or that letter makes and try it again. We don't ignore the errors. We give that corrective feedback right there in the moment. And it's always with, ease and love and, with support, and all is good. Okay. So I do want to spend a few moments discussing the book reading activity, specifically decodable books. So if you haven't heard of a decodable book, these are books that contain words with letters and spelling patterns your child already knows or is currently learning. They're a great way for your child to practice with a book that they will feel successful with. Okay, this will build their confidence as a reader instead of handing them a simple book. But it doesn't matter how few words are in the book. If they don't know the letter sound patterns of those words, they're just going to start guessing at it. And those are bad word reading habits that we do not want to support. This program uses a variety of free online decodable books from several publishers. And I want to give a shout out to the Reading Institute team who has really scoured the internet for publishers that are going to give out free books. And then what we do is we map them to our phonics scope and sequence. Okay. Now, because we didn't write our own books, this is not a perfect fit, but it's very good. So every once in a while, you're going to have some words that your child will not know. And that's okay. Overwhelmingly, the book is going to contain the decodable patterns or the letter sound patterns they are working with. When they come upon a word that they don't know because you didn't teach them that letter sound pattern yet, just give the word and move on, okay? If they didn't learn it yet, just give it and keep going, okay? You will access all of these free decodable books in each unit using the QR code. So you see this on the screen there. We put the little bit.ly link or the QR code, and what will happen is the book will just come up on your tablet or on your phone. So no worries if you don't have a tablet, your tablet's not charged or all the things that happens with tablets and households. You can just pull it up on your phone and you can flip through it like this, or sometimes they scroll up and down.
And it's just a really nice way to end each one of these caregiver lessons. Okay, to summarize, there are 10 units in the Reading Ready Caregiver Guide. Each unit, so the unit, think of the sets of letter sound combinations you're going to teach. Each one of those has 3 daily lessons, which you can repeat. So you can do it, that unit 3 times, all the way up to 6 times. It's going to give you 30 to 60 lessons. Every time you do a lesson, there will be 4 activities in that lesson that we hope you can get to within 15 minutes. But you know my disclaimer, you're just going to make this work as best you can, okay? If you get 5 minutes in, consider it a great success. If you're grabbing food somewhere and you want to do your little sound practice activity while you're waiting for the food, you do your little sound practice activity, you get home, maybe you pull out some letters, you do the word practice, and moving on. Maybe you keep the letter sound cards in your pocket or your purse and you pull them out on the subway, okay? And finally, okay, so the last thing we're going to go over very briefly is actually a different book, okay? It's a different guide that we give out for free, of course, okay? Because some of you may be thinking, well, my child isn't really ready for Unit 1. They still don't know the letters STPAIN, right? That we said are in Unit 1. Please don't torture yourself or your child by insisting they move through Unit 1 if they don't know the letters yet. And so we've got you covered, okay? We have another resource that we give out called the Reading Ready Letter Knowledge Activity Guide, okay? It's just a set. Here's the QR code. You'll pull it up. It has a gray cover, and Maddie and Emily are putting the bit.ly link in there, okay? This letter knowledge guide on the next page, on the next slide, you'll see the gray cover, okay? It can be used with early childhood age students and older students who still need more support to learn their letter names, shapes, and sounds. So one thing I want to note, learning letters is very difficult, okay? It's not just A says A, it's you need to know the name of the letter, the shape of the letter, the sound of the letter, and many letters have multiple sounds. It's a lot of memorization actually that happens in the early childhood years when we don't actually have that much working memory capacity, okay? So you need lots and lots and lots of repetitions. Just note that in this gray guide, there is an assessment on page 5, which we usually use this assessment with teachers who are working with older students. And we're trying to figure out with these older students, we don't want to waste any time. So we're trying to pinpoint what letter names, shapes, or sounds they don't know yet. If you want to use it with your child, great, but maybe just jump to the lowercase letter assessment if you feel like you've done a lot of uppercase and it's, overwhelmingly words are going to be read with lowercase letters, okay? On page 14, there is an 8-step letter learning protocol. Again, I wrote this for older students who there's no time to waste and they needed a structured approach to learning these names, shapes, and sounds. So you have to figure out where your child is. If you're in pre-K, just do the games. Don't worry about the structured protocol. You're fine. You're developmentally, you're right where you're supposed to be. Learn those 3 aspects of a letter. By the second half of kindergarten, if some letter knowledge hasn't been solidified, you might start glancing at that 8-step learning protocol. Definitely for a first or second grader who's still missing some letter knowledge, let's go right to that explicit protocol. But we have all these games that you're going to use within the protocol, but the protocol hugs it all and gives this explicit approach to make sure we've got this knowledge given it directly to the child, okay? Most importantly about this guide, there are 47 fun and engaging games and activities to support your child and to have fun while learning letters, okay? And here, some of the things we want you to consider when it comes to letter knowledge, just a few tips here. Children will recognize and learn the letters in their names first, okay? And that is important and wonderful, but not obviously enough. while you're trying to expand their letter knowledge beyond their name, be careful not to teach letters that look or sound alike at the same time. This can cause confusion. For example, the lowercase letters B and D have a very similar shape. The letters M and N both look and sound the same. So in the early days, in the early year even of teaching these, let's not put them together when we're giving our explicit instruction. Let's keep them separate. Finally, something you may not be aware of is that some letters are easier to learn for children than others. We won't dive into the research, but here on the slide, you'll see this continuum of letters O, B, A, and C are the easiest. So all the way on the left, these are the easiest letters to learn, all the way to the most difficult to commit to memory. So again, some letters will need more practice and more games. All right. So you can also use the letter knowledge guide with the caregiver guide. So some of you on this call may say, you know what, I'm just going to start with letter knowledge and we're going to have fun with those games. Other people may say, you know what, I'm somewhere between, my kiddo is somewhere between knowing their letters and sounds and doing the word reading. And so this is how we're going to support you. You might use the letter knowledge guide for a few days before unit 1. So now we're in the caregiver scope and sequence. You might go to the gray book, do your letter knowledge before you hop into unit 1, just to make sure that letter knowledge is in place. And then in the caregiver guide, you'll just review it. Then you would move to unit 2 in the caregiver guide. And after unit 1, you could go back to the letter knowledge guide and teach those letters before you actually go into unit 2. So you would go letter knowledge, unit 1, letter knowledge, unit 2, all right? And you can follow this pattern for units 3 and 4 as well, so your child has a chance to learn or review the letters' names, shapes, and sounds before putting those into practice, reading and spelling words. Okay, I encourage you to review the games and activities in the letter knowledge guide, okay? This just gives you, it shows you, again, we're trying to be as simple as possible with the directions to give you a guide and give you a picture so you can visualize what each one of these games would look like. Oftentimes it's using household materials. You pull things out of other board games you might have in the house, or simple construction paper will get the job done. All right. Again, most of this you will have around the house. So just know that we broke the manual into letter recognition games and then letter sound games. So first it might just be, do you know what the names of these letters are? And then in the second half of the manual, we said, now let's match the letter to the sound. Thank you so much. I'm kind of giving an abrupt ending here. So I just want to summarize by saying, we have given you the blue guide, which is the caregiver guide electronically. And if you do this QR code, we are very happy to use our grant money to send you a hard copy. I think as a parent, it's nice. I'm always advocating for hard copies. I think it's really nice to have it at the table instead of always having our electronics out. Also, we gave you an electronic copy of letter knowledge. We hope in the future to get more grant money to send you a hard copy of that one as well. But for now, we can at least ship you the blue caregiver guide. So if you go onto this specific QR code, you could give us feedback. We're always trying to improve, and provide whatever shipping address you want. You can give us a neighbor's address. It doesn't matter. We just want to get you the hard copy as soon as possible. So please do that. And I can stay for a few minutes. We're ending early, which is always nice. And I just want to say thank you again to the Reading League. What an organization. I have wonderful colleagues at the Reading League that provide the platform for us to share and distribute these types of resources to both caregivers and educators. Thank you so much.